Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Well, we're talking now about DC's Legends of Tomorrow, which premiered this week on the CW. Overall, it was okay. The effects, it looked good. It has a pretty good cast of characters developed by Greg Berlanti. Basically, the characters from Arrow, from Flash. We see a crossover. We get a guest spot with the Green Arrow now. Oliver Queen there with the Atom. And you basically have a time traveler who brings all these not even A-list heroes together. And he is basically trying to save the world from Vandal Savage, which was touched on in Arrow and the Flash crossovers, where the Arrow is just completely serious with a little bit of humor this season, but some really horrific things happen on there. We see the Flash as having a more lighthearted approach. It sometimes seems to have the villain of the week kind of motif there. So anyway, with the idea of DC's Legends of Tomorrow, we have Rip Hunter, who is a time traveler. Kind of looks like he's kind of dressed in the trench coat. It kind of reminds me of a little Doctor Who-ish, and he's a time traveler. And in the first episode of Pilot Part 1, he basically is trying to bring together these characters and most of them are heroes in their own right. Like, we have Victor Garber, who's now with Professor Martin Stein, and they become Firestorm. The two people merge into that, and that's good. I like Brandon Routh as Ray Palmer, the Atom. He does a good job. He's kind of quirky, as when he was in Superman Returns, he was very serious as Clark Kent and Superman, but he's found like a second superhero life playing the Atom. And then we have Sarah Lance, who is now called the White Canary, and originally she was on, I think it was Arrow season 2. She was the Canary. And then the next season they killed her off. Then in season 4, the following season, they brought her back using the Lazarus Pit of Ra's al Ghul. And that was on Arrow. So she's based upon basically the Black Canary. And we have different versions. But in this adaptation, Sarah Lance is the White Canary. And then we have, Jefferson Jackson, or Jax, as they call him, Firestorm. And so the Firestorm entity is pretty good. Because you originally had the guy, Ronnie, the character of Ronnie, and he died as Firestorm. Long story. It's very complicated. You know the story. But anyway, so we have Hawk Girl and we have Hawkman in there, which I was very excited to see. At first, their relationship just seems so strained. I mean, the chemistry between the actors doesn't quite seem to have melded yet for me. We have Heatwave and Captain Cold, and they're basically the two bad guys that are kind of thrown in the bunch here. And you kind of want them to be good guys, but especially Captain Cold, because Wentworth Miller does a great job playing him as Captain Cold. He does he can basically freeze things, and then this arsonist friend of his, Mick Rory, is Heatwave. But anyway, so you bring all these characters together and to get a cool ship with Gideon, which ironically, or I'm sure it's all tied in. I know it's all tied in. Gideon was the name of the computer that on the Flash, the that he interacted with Reverse Flash did. And spoiler alert: the Reverse Flash is coming back to the Flash, even though he was killed. So it's kind of like a soap opera, but it's a superhero soap opera. We will see Casper Crump is the actor playing Vandal Savage. He's basically about 4,000 years old, so he's immortal, and he's kind of, been in all the major things during history, trying to manipulate things, and just basically starting war after war after war, and he basically is the antagonist in this show, or at least so far. And the whole premise is to go throughout time and prevent Earth from being annihilated. So we've got a full, I think, 11 to 13 episodes for this. So we're going to see how it turns out. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to see how it goes. But I wasn't blown away by it. There were some cool things that looked nice. It was kind of awesome, but all in all, Legends of Tomorrow really has to kind of up its game a little bit. It's got to get up on the level with Flash and with Arrow, even though they have their own different themes, and I do like that they are stylized in those different themes. Just not as impressed with it as I would like to be. I want to see just a little bit more on that. So Legends of Tomorrow is on CW, and of all the networks, I really like the fact that Supergirl is on CBS because there's a bigger budget. But basically the reception we get with our local CW stations, the Arrow, Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow, especially on the Flash, I noticed the effects just don't translate well. I think it's just probably my local CW channel, so CW, up your game a little bit too. But I'm not hating on you, because if it wasn't for CW, we wouldn't have Arrow, we wouldn't have Flash, we wouldn't have Legends of Tomorrow. And if it weren't for Greg Berlanti, we wouldn't have any of this. So very happy with him. He's pretty much all over, got his hands in everything. And, he's been doing, Berlanti's been doing Arrow since 2012. Still going on. Very strong show. The Flash since 2014. And now Legends of Tomorrow. So check out on the CW, Legends of Tomorrow.
It's time for a geekcation to your favorite geek destination.
So everybody's been complaining about the weather, how it's been unusually warm, how Christmas was warm, how the hottest year on record was 2015, before that it was 2014, before that it was possibly 2013, etc., etc. What does that all have to do with what I'm going to talk about? Well, this weekend, snowstorm, blizzard, Jonas, because we now name these storms in the winter. And so Jonas struck all the way from Georgia, Tennessee, all the way up the Mid-Atlantic, and buried a lot of people in record snowfall. So it made me think, what were some of the sci-fi places you could go to and visit if you were trying to get away from some of the places? Well, first off, we got to start with the coldest of all sci-fi planets, and a favorite of mine, Hoth from The Empire Strikes Back in Star Wars. That would definitely be some place that you think you've got it bad, but you haven't felt cold until you've lived on Hoth, where things can just be beyond unbearable. So let's flip the script. Let's say you're looking for the opposite of Hoth. Well, I've got another one for you, and once again from Star Wars, this time from Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. What about a volcanic planet like Mustafar? where we see the rise of Darth Vader and the epic battles between Anakin Skywalker and his own fear of losing Padme and turning to the dark side, but even the bigger physical battles against his friend and mentor Obi-Wan Kenobi, who tries to fend him off and keep him from going to the dark side, but we all know how that ends up. So maybe you don't want the cold of Hoth, and then Mustafar is just way, way too hot, too much volcanic activity on the entire planet. So then you think about, well, let's go to another Star Wars planet, an ocean planet. From Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, we have Kamino. And it's a nice ocean planet, and it has the Kamino people that are cloners, as they call them, and they create the clone army, and Obi-Wan Kenobi goes there. So maybe that's too wet for you. Maybe you just don't want to be where it's constantly raining, it's constantly wet all the time. So you don't want the extreme cold, you don't want the extreme heat, you don't want the extreme water, the wetness and all that. Maybe you want a dry desert planet. Well, we've got plenty of them. Once again, a couple from Star Wars, but there's a lot more. We have from Episode 4, the first time we saw it, and Tatooine, where whiny little Luke Skywalker comes from. And then we have Jakku from The Force Awakens, where Rey comes from. So, both from Star Wars. And so far, it looks like I'm sticking with Star Wars. And you think, well, heck, there's got to be more. Well, there's actually from Star Trek, the original series, and throughout the universes. If we're talking about desert planets, there's Vulcan. We've seen through even the new J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where it got blown up. Sorry, Spock. But it's a desert planet. We have several incarnations of an actual planet. Maybe you want to go to a real planet, and eventually, maybe in my lifetime or beyond my lifetime a little bit, maybe we'll actually step foot on this actual planet, but the planet of Mars, and it's been in so many movies. One of the biggest one was in Total Recall, where Mars is inhabited by basically mutants and people that are just laboring, and there is a tax they have there on the air, and it's very limited. And the original Total Recall, they also had the reboot of it, but you actually should watch Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger from back in the day there. We also have in the Star Trek universe the first planet to actually be terraformed and actually settled by the first group of Picards was Mars. If you remember from Star Trek Generations, which ironically I was watching the other day, was on Sci-Fi Channel, I believe. The wonderful scene, Patrick Stewart and his Robert and his wife, which is Picard's brother, they get burned in a fire, and their son survives, and it's a wonderful scene in Star Trek Generations. But time is the fire in which we burn. Looking for the energy ribbon there, and in that movie. And we also get, Kirk and Picard first time together on screen, which is awesome. But we don't actually get to see Mars there, obviously. But Picard does mention that he remembers being told about the Picards, who were the first to settle the planet of Mars, and, have first settlements on there with, the Federation of Planets. So there's been lots of movies about Mars. Most of our alien invasion movies are from Mars. It's an endless list. One of the ones I think about is John Carter. And then later, if we ever see a sequel, John Carter from Mars, which was very good and underrated movie. It just did not receive the box office for such a good movie that it was. But Mars is probably one of the greatest desert planets out there, and it actually exists. But if I had to pick a perfect planet, once again I have to go back to the Star Trek universe. And It was known really well. It's a very lush kind of resort-like planet, and Commander Riker loved going to it. Risa. And it's in the sector where Starbase 12 is located, and it's just they have uninhibited sexuality on there. They play host of millions of people that come there for things that basically it's anything goes. It's kind of like Las Vegas, but a planet that's just a tropical, beautiful paradise. And the people on there are very kind of freewheeling by nature. And it's roughly about 6 hours-ish in that timeline from Deep Space Nine. So Deep Space Nine, not too far from Risa. But our perfect planet geekcation destination would be Risa from Star Trek, from the Star Trek universe. And so if you get a chance, you should visit Risa, or think about Risa. Don't think about the record snowfall out there. Unless, of course, you love the ice planet Hoth, then Hoth be with you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.
Geek Homeworld.